Alright, so we're back again with another video. Here we are with the exact same circle that we had before. No changes whatsoever, but we're back into the basics, basic introduction videos for you guys to watch and to learn from. This is in the previous video I told you guys that I was going to teach you guys about certain things. One of them I believe was this join button here, if I remember correctly. And there were a couple other things that I touched on in that video that I will try to cover in this video if at all possible. So without further ado, I'll get straight into it, because even though these are going to be longer videos to teach you guys in depth how things work, I also don't want you guys to be watching a bunch of needless stuff that you don't necessarily have to get into if you don't want to. So to keep it short, I'll just jump right into it and make this video as short as I possibly can, and give you more of the good stuff and less of the chatter. Anyway, so to get straight into it, the join button here, I'm assuming, if I remember correctly, is going to help you to be able to join multiple objects. So this object here we have here allows us to, oh crap, apparently I have messed up my 3D viewport and no longer have the ability to move around based on my my normal movement scale. So that's a little weird, but we shouldn't need it too much for this particular video because we can still manipulate things. Maybe? Okay, that's being extra weird. Not sure why it's doing that, but the 3D viewport itself has been a little bit manipulated. I will figure out why that is the case. If you guys are experiencing this too, then I'm sorry, but this is literally the first time this has ever happened to me, and I have made dozens upon, probably in the hundreds of projects now. Yeah, I'm probably close to hundreds of projects that I've worked on. I don't know. I've worked on so many projects, I forget how many I've worked on. But I've never had this happen. So we'll figure it out later. All the buttons are apparently still working because I can still scale stuff. I can still rotate, apparently, I'm assuming. Yes. And I can still translate. So we're good. I'll just use these buttons over here because the shortcuts aren't working either. That's really weird. Okay. But it doesn't hinder our progress. We will still make it through this. So let's say we want, for sake of learning, oh yeah, I have to, that's so primitive. Anyway, okay, so to use this, the scale here, so I can't rotate it, so I'm just going to try and make you very aware that these are two separate objects. One, click and alter one. Okay, I can't even click and alter it. Wow, that's a whole new low. Wow. What is going on? I have no idea what's going on. I actually don't. But these are two separate objects here. Maybe if I set the user preferences, maybe I need to redo this video. Okay, input, left click. Yeah, that's what I thought. Save. Yeah. Oh, okay. We got controls back. Cool. Well, that didn't take too much to figure out. I'm not sure why it did it in the first place, but it's all back to normal. I can now rotate at free will and show you guys a little bit more about this. So the join tool, getting back to it, now that we are 4 minutes into our video, the join tool is very simple. Basically, like it says here, the shortcut for it is Control-J. You can join objects to an active object. This right now is our active object because we have it selected. If we were to select this one, it is now our active object. If we hit Shift on our keyboard, Shift is like our duplicate, and then we were to click the other one, we now have two objects. The one that is yellow is the active object. Just remember that. Yellow equals active. Orange here, orange equals inactive. It is the secondary object. It's active in the fact that it's part of our mesh. You can see right here, we have this in the very center of it because we are able to manipulate both of them. And so it puts the circle here and the origin point for both of these, now that they're both selected, in the middle of the two origin points there, in the dead center middle, so that you can manipulate both according to the fact that you selected both of them. But the join tool over here, if you have both of these selected, which again, if you, just for reference purposes, is clicking on one of the objects, and just so you know, you're going to want the more dominant one to be selected last. Because if I have, let's say, I have a bunch of objects. Let's say I make 2 more circles, okay? Which I could have just duplicated the circle, I just realized. And I have all of those there. That one looks super tiny, but in reality it's not that tiny. I mean, it's smaller than this one, but it looks tinier because it's further away. Oh, that's better. Okay, so now I have 4 objects here. If I wanted this right here to be the most dominant one, so let's say I wanted the origin point here, which is the base, or this white circle here with all of these colored lines pointing out of it. If I wanted that there, which is the manipulation point between or of my selected object, so I can manipulate it, which these arrows equal translation or transition. Wait, translation, translation. Sorry, translate it, which is like to move it. If you took geometry, it's to move something physically, not rotating or nothing. If I were to want to move something like that, it would move it based off of this origin point in the very center of this white circle, because it has to choose between the two of these, so it combines the efforts of both of them and puts it together to make the center. So if I wanted to be more dominant, let's say I select all of these there. Obviously this center point here isn't necessarily center of any one of these particular dots, but because I selected it in a certain order, it just is there. So if I were to select this one, then this one, then this one, then this one, you can see, okay, maybe it actually keeps it in the same one. But this is now the selected object, which is the dominant object. So if I were to hit Control J or join, which is what we were talking about over here in the Edit tab of Tools, if I were to hit join, it would join them all together based off of this origin point. So now they're all one item. If I were to deselect them by pressing A on the keyboard, which, if you don't know, is the shortcut when in object mode for selecting all, which I guess if you're in edit mode, you could go to edit mode here, and this looks weird right now, but that's just, I'll explain it. If you were to select all, it's the same thing in edit mode. It just selects every face or vertice or whatever you have selected down here. It'll select all of whatever it is that you're choosing from. So it's just the select all button. But we don't need the select all button. We're going to deselect all by pressing A so that it deselects everything that is selected. And then we're just going to click with our mouse on this option here, and you can see these all highlighted. They all highlighted, and they're all manipulative because we have joined every one of these meshes together. This tool is very useful. Now that I know what it does, I use Control J all the time because Control J is for join, but I didn't know that this button did the exact same thing that Control J does, which turns out they're the exact same thing. Why would join mean anything else? I'm not sure. I was being an idiot. Anyway, so now they're all joined, but because I selected this one last, it joins selected objects to an active object. This was the active object, so it joined these 3 to this one. This is the dominant one, which if you think about it like a pack of wolves, this one now controls the rest of them. When you move it like this, it doesn't really seem like it because they all move the same based off of the fact that you moved it. But if I were to rotate it, that's where things get interesting, because this object here in the very center is hardly moving at all, because these ones are the ones that are following this one's motion. This is the active object, the wolf of the pack. If this one decides, let's say for instance, that it wants to stalk its prey, And I know it seems pretty weird to you guys, and you guys are probably like, why in the world is this guy still talking? But let's say this cube over here is its prey. This guy is going to take the lead to follow its prey. It's going to tell everybody to stay behind it, and then it's going to move and creep slowly towards it. Slowly, piece by piece, it's going to make the move towards the gazelle, keeping them all behind it. I said gazelle because this is how I'm picturing it, but until it's able to pounce. So that's just the only reason why I said all of those things and why I did all of this is just to show you. Oh my gosh, I did a lot. It is just to show you what the purpose of joining is. So right now I've gone back by undoing, if you remember from the last video. I just undid every single thing in the undo history, which, by the way, is not unlimited, so don't make so many mistakes thinking, oh, I can just take it all back and go straight to the beginning. No, I think you have like 25 undos or something, so once you make 25 actions, you can go back. But once you hit 26, I think that's when it cuts you off, and you no longer have it saved in your cache memory, which is like temporal files on your computer. It deletes them so that you don't end up filling your entire computer with undoable actions. So it's 25, it's limited. But what I just did there was I just undid all of the actions that happened, and one of them was the joining action. So now they're no longer joined to that action. So if I wanted the cube to be the dominant one, I would select everything except the cube, and then select the cube last. So it still has the same origin point until they are joined. But once they are joined, that becomes the origin point. So now I can rotate this object based around the cube instead of the circle like what I had before. You might notice the shading on this changed a little bit. Don't question it, it's just part of the program. Nothing going on there. Don't worry about it, it's not that important. Anyway, so that is the join tool. To put it as brief as I possibly can while making it very obvious what it does. Okay, and another thing I wanted to cover in this video, now that I've gotten all of this stuff, I think that's all I had from the other video that I said I was going to highlight later. If not, I'll go look through the video again. But I think that we've covered everything for that, so now I want to get into the actual purpose of making this video. So the actual purpose for this video is to show you guys the basic controls of the viewport. So right now we have our circle. We're staring at it at a roughly, if we change it here, 45-degree angle from red here being whatever 0 and green being 90. We're at a 45-degree angle staring at it from roughly about a 37-degree angle above it as well. I'm not going to say that for sure because I'm not actually, no, actually I'm pretty sure that's about 37, considering this would be like 45 and this would be 90. So yeah, it's about 37 degrees. I don't know, it's not that important. We are staring at this object in the 3D viewport based off of this graph at roughly a 45-degree angle. Okay, so now you know that that's the viewport. That's how that works. That's just so you can use the grid to be able to manipulate things. Let's say I wanted to move this object here one space in whatever direction. I would just be able to move it 1, and it would move it 1. And that's the benefit of knowing all of the keyboard shortcuts, is that I can do that without having to like guess whether or not I've clicked it perfectly right in there in the center. Is that right where it needs to be? Whatever. This isn't right. Oh no. But so you know all the keyboard shortcuts. I will get into the keyboard shortcuts later. I've covered a little bit of them, or a couple of them, in this video and the last video that I made. But the keyboard shortcuts we'll get into later. The main keyboard shortcuts that I want to cover right now is just the number pad. So if you have a keyboard that doesn't have a number pad, this video is going to be 100% useless except for learning about the join tool. So if you're at that point, just skip right over this. Skip right over this video, go to the next one. I'm sorry I wasted more of your time talking. If you want to watch the rest of the video, you can. It's up to you, but it's going to be useless because this is learning how to go based off of or how to use the number pad to use your to manipulate your viewport. So to just get right into it and to get started, this is pretty basic knowledge. It's not going to take another 15 minutes, and we're at 15 minutes right now in the video, so it's not going to take another 15 minutes to explain this. So it might be actually a relatively short video, but I'm going to try and go as much into detail as I can to make it, a detailed analysis on this so that you guys can get the best or the best review that you possibly can. Anyway, so if you go over to your number pad and you click the number 1, you see that it does something to your object, to your view, and the graph, if you were looking very closely and watching, has moved. So the grid moved so that you're now looking at the grid from the side. So now it just looks like a line, because it's like if you held up a pane of glass in front of your face, but you held it horizontally perfectly, then you're looking at the pane of glass from the side, and you don't see it as a pane of glass as much as like just a line of glass, if that makes any sense. I don't know. It's like if you look at a plate horizontally, the plate looks like a flat surface instead of a circular plate. It looks flat because you're looking at it from the side. So this is the side view. This is actually the front perspective. It's one of the side views, which when you're working in animation, it's considered front perspective because this is staring at the object from the front. But it's not really that important. It's just one of the sides. That's all you need to know. That's really all you need to know. So that's number 1, which is front perspective. If you look up here, front perspective. We'll just pretend it says perspective. It's obviously abbreviated, but front perspective is 1. 3 is right perspective, which there is no shortcut for left perspective, but it's not that important because if you go 7, that's top perspective. So it's 1, 3, and 7, which are the corners of your numbers themselves. Your 1 through 9, what everybody has seen as long as you've ever owned a telephone with T9 or even a smartphone. They still have the same setup for the number pad. 1, 2, 3 on the bottom, 4, 5, 6 in the middle, and 7, 8, 9 on the top. The basic standard stuff. Look at that grid of 3 by 3, that 9 character grid, and it's the corner options. The bottom left there is the 1, bottom right is the 3, and top left is the 7. Those are your 3 options for choosing between front, right, and top. Now 9 is the other one in the corner. It's the one that's kind of seems like it's left out because it doesn't have a direction set to it. But what it actually does is very helpful. Let's say I'm using 7 because I'm looking at my object from the top and I want to, if this were a character's scalp, I want to make sure that I manipulate the scalp. I want to draw in to my character a scalp line. Like I want to be able to make hair out the sides and make it realistic, and I want it to come. Obviously this isn't very good hair, but you wouldn't do hair with a sculpt tool anyway, so don't worry about it, okay? Stop judging me. Anyway, if I wanted to make a scalp, I would do it from top view because you're looking at the top of the head. If I did it from the side here or from the bottom or any other view, I can't get a full view of the whole entire scalp. So what I'm actually editing is the side of the head when I want to be editing the top. So obviously that's why you want to know the number pad skills. Number pad equals better way to manipulate things. And obviously you could just like rotate it to where it looks like it's at the top, and you can do it that way. That's honestly most of the time that will do perfectly fine. But 7 is so much easier, and it centers it perfectly. It actually puts the mesh perfectly from the top. So you are looking at this based on a computer's calculated style of perfection, you are actually looking at this object perfectly from the top, 100% from the dead center top, something you wouldn't be able to do when you freehand, because perfection is not within the human nature code. It's just not. But computers can pull it off perfectly fine. So this is a perfect view of exactly the top of the mesh. So you can manipulate the exact same no matter what on the mesh you are touching. So that's pretty handy. What 9 does, now going back to the number pad, the number 9 flips it. So now I am looking at the bottom perspective. If you can see from up here in the left, it now says bottom. 9 flips it between the two. So it flips it 180 degrees to the exact opposite side of the mesh. And you can see when I click it, originally, if you check this top left corner over here, it'll change when I click the 9 button. As it's changing to the top perspective, it also says user, because that's how Blender is built. So it recognizes this view, the view between being top and bottom, as user view. So when it's flipping it for you, in the process of flipping it, because Blender is built to transition so it's easier for your brain to understand, it uses transition animations to flip it for you so you can see it kind of flipping to the other side. So you're not as lost. It doesn't just automatically next frame you're staring at the bottom. So you have to question whether or not you're staring at the bottom and look up here. Instead, it kind of transitions and you see it transition from top to bottom. And because you're seeing it, it is showing you in real time that this is the user's perspective because the computer did not make this view. You did. So it's what would normally be in the top corner there, user perspective. That's what would normally be there if the computer was not the one making the view, like that. So that flips between the two. And yes, in case you're wondering, that does apply for every angle. So now I'm looking at the front, now I'm looking at the back. And of course I clicked 1 to look at the front, like I said before, and then 9 to look at the back. So now we're looking at the back, and I can click 9 over and over again, and it flips between the front and the back. And of course user perspective in between. And if you look in the bottom left-hand corner here, it also has transitions here, very handy little things, which you can use, by the way. Handy little transitions here of this little tiny graph that shows you really weird 2D animation, kind of hard to follow, like an orthographic render of exactly what's going on in the background of this as well. So you're getting real-time event up here, real-time event up here, and you're seeing in real time a flip of the model here. So you're never left out. You always know what you're looking at. And that's what I like about Blender. So right now, if you kind of saw the transition to the right perspective up here, now we are back to, if you click 3, the right perspective, which is what you get when you initially click 3. Now if I click 9, you got it. It goes to left perspective. Wow. Never would have guessed that that would have happened. You know, 9 flips it from 180 degrees from what you're looking at to what will be on the exact opposite side of the mesh. So now this is the exact opposite side. And you can tell it's 180 degrees because if you watch this green line, it's pointing right because it's always pointing directly across the green line here. It is always pointing 100% straight down this line. So if I were to go to this and I flip it, it's now pointing down the line the other way. So now you know for a fact that you have flipped 180 degrees. And that's kind of the viewport for you. But there's also the other buttons like 2, 4, 6, and 8, the even numbered ones. Those are the incremental transitions. Let's say you didn't want to look at the front, or the right, or the left, or the top, or the bottom. Let's say you wanted to look at like Not quite the front, but like a 45-degree angle like what we were looking at over here. Let's say you wanted to look at this particular image. You could click 1 to look at front, then you can click 6. So the even numbers based around the 5, if you look at it like that, they kind of make arrows, and some of your keyboards, if you have a number pad, might have this already in the keys, but if you look on the keys themselves, at least in mine, this may not be true for yours, but in mine, the 8 has an up arrow, the 4 has a left arrow, the 2 has a down arrow, and the 6 has a right arrow inside the key along with those numbers to indicate that they also can be used if you hold Shift, I believe, or FN, depending on your keyboard. Those can be used for those different buttons instead of using the up, down, left, and right arrow keys that are also probably on your keyboard if you have a number pad as well. So instead of using all of those keys, instead of being an 8 or a 4 or being an input, because we are using Blender here and we're actually using the 3D viewport, these serve a different purpose. They don't input an 8 or a 4 or a 6 or a 2. They instead are used as the up, down, left, and right arrows by default, just because we are in this viewport. That's not always true. They sometimes are used for numbers, but as long as you are in object mode in the viewport with your mouse cursor inside the viewport itself. If it's outside, I don't think it does the same thing. No, because you can click it all you want, but it doesn't change anything. Same with all the other 1, 3, 7, and 9. You have to have your cursor inside the box with the mesh itself, so that it knows that you're manipulating this and not typing something in this menu over here. So as long as you're in this menu, I can hit 6. Let's say 6 there. Okay? Now you can see there's a little bit of a line here, so you can't see it too much. So maybe what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to start on the front. Okay? And I'm going to hit 8 and 2 instead. So if I hit 8, you can see a lot better how it transitions, because now you can see the grid. So now you know a little bit of what it did. What this does is it rotates perfectly according to calculations of the computer itself, the entire mesh upwards 27.5 degrees, which is 1/2 of our 45-degree angle, which is what we wanted to hit. This right here is a 45-degree angle. If I click it again, okay, actually maybe it's not. But it moves in increments, probably 12.5, 12.4? I can't remember the exact increments, but you can see that it moves it, if I click 8 here, in increments across the stage. So obviously right now I'm looking at dead straight top view. Like, I clicked top view there, and it did not change. If I click these buttons here, it says user perspective, because as far as it knows, you are not calculated into any particular view, because this is your user preference perspective. It's not the top view. The way that top view is, not your way, but the way the computer makes it, that's top view. But this is based off of where you want it to be. It's your own little user input. So you can change this as much as you want. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 clicks between the side view and the top view, which means, unfortunately, that we can't actually hit a 45-degree angle, because there would have to be an odd number of clicks between top view and front view in order to make it true. Because if we had 7, for instance, then 4, I believe 4 would be our middle ground. So we would go 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'd be perfect. But in order to be a halfway point, you'd also have to be able to do this and hit the exact same amount going this way to be able to hit top. Needless to say, it's kind of pointless to really know. You don't need it too much, but that's 8 and 2. So they manipulate up and down to rotate in increments the view of your object. Then you have 6 and 4, which do the exact same thing, but sideways. So now, okay, this definitely, because of how far away this is here from there, and this is here from there, they're about exactly symmetrical, and I'm looking straight at this line here, dead straight at it. So I guarantee this one here is a 45-degree angle. I'm not sure why up and down don't do 45-degree angles, but look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, it's 6. Maybe it is possible to do a direct 45-degree angle. I don't know. But yeah, it moves it in increments along a number pad, which if you've played old games like I have done a lot of, that kind of movement just makes sense to you. So you don't need to worry about it. That's just to help you if you really want to. Again, I personally never end up using this as an animator. Can it be useful? Yes, because you're moving things incrementally perfectly, so you're able to move things more on a grid format, which helps you to be able to work with your mesh a lot more perfectly. So you could do exactly what you wanted with it, instead of like, oh, I think this is right where I want it to be. I think this is right where I want it to be. You're like, instead, oh, I want it to be 45 degrees over to the side. So as long as I do this properly, and I make it so that I know it's 45 degrees, now I can put it here and know confidently that that's exactly 45 degrees across my mesh. So it's a good way to grid format things. And then we've got our last button, which we have gone past 30 minutes. I'm surprised that we did. I am much of a talker, and you guys are probably bored. But our last button is the number 5. This one also is extremely important. Probably, I'm going to be honest with you, 1, 3, 7, and 9 are probably the most important buttons aside from 5. All of the odd numbers on your machine, or on your number pad, the odd number buttons are so much more important than the even number buttons, except 0. We'll talk about that soon. Okay, actually I lied. This 5 isn't the last number, but we'll go over the whole number pad. So 5 is one of the most important, probably one of the most used. So let's say you really wanted to get perfection and an absolute perfect symmetrical no matter what mesh on both sides. What 5 does is it puts it in 2D mode, which basically if you click it, it looks kind of ridiculous. It throws your view off, especially if you have something like a cube. Like let's say we have this cube here. We'll get rid of our circle for now. Okay, I might have made a plane. That's a plane. That is not a cube. Awkward. Cube. Okay, now we have a cube. Okay, so we have a cube. You can see it's a cube, but let's say we click 5. Okay, now it's a cube still. It's still a cube, but it's kind of finicky. And if you hold it, like here, it kind of looks like some of the lengths of this cube are longer than others. Like this face here doesn't look quite, this looks super stretched. Like this is a super long edge and that one's super short. Like it kind of manipulates with your mind. And if you hold it right here especially, it looks like this face on this side of the cube is smaller than this face back here. That's because you're in orthographic mode, which ironically enough, if you were to go 1 and hit it from the front, now you are looking at it like it's exactly the same. Okay, so if I were to, you don't need to know this part, but if I were to scale down this face here, you can see I changed the size of this particular face, which changed in essence the entire cube. But it's still a square in comparison to these. But if I were to hit 5 once again, now that you can see that, I hit 5 once again, and it looks a lot more like a square. But that's because we are now out of 2D animation. So what 2D animation does, to kind of make it super simple, is, let's see if I have like a grease pencil here. We'll do a grease pencil, and we'll just add a new one. And actually, screw that. We'll just go, we'll just do this the easier way. Believe it or not, this is easier. Okay, boom. So we've subdivided this mesh here. So now we can manipulate it with sculpt mode. So let's say I have this cube here. Just pretend this side of this face here is a piece of paper. I'm just trying to present this to you in the best way possible. So let's say I have this cube here. Orthographic mode, which is what we're looking at right now with this grid here, that's how you know you're in orthographic mode. It also says front ortho, which is orthographic, instead of front perspective, because it's not perspective, it's based on orthographic. So that's one way to tell. The other way is the grid, especially since we're looking at this from front view. So if we weren't in orthographic mode, there's no grid. So basically the best way to put this though is if I have an object where, okay, I'm going to turn off the symmetry. Yeah, so now I can draw freely. So there's a little hint there. I'll go over it in a future video just so you know, but yeah, symmetry, now you know about that. Anyway, so if I have this object here, it's made out of these vertices, okay? So I have this vertice here, this vertice here, this vertice here, this vertice here, and I have this plane, okay? And then I have, obviously, if I were to draw a cube, I'd have these vertices as well, and blah, blah, blah. You know, it's not the best cube in the world, but it's a cube. So now I've got a cube. I've got a very crappy looking cube. I'll get over it myself and forget about that fact. But I have a cube. And this cube, all of the faces in this cube, I know this one particularly doesn't make any sense. This one out here, the one that I'm actually drawing on, does have perfect edges. I mean, aside from the fact that I changed the size of this one just for the perspective showing. But it does have different size, or the same size faces when it's initially made. If I were to make a new cube, every one of the faces would be one unit. No matter what that unit is, you can change it over here in properties menu. You can change what the size of units are. I don't know which menu it's in again, but it's not really that important. Here it is, dimensions, scale, so you can change it to like meters and stuff, so that one unit, which is one space between here and here on the grid, one single space across is one unit, and you can change the value of what that means, like 1 meter, 1 foot. You can change what that unit means or what it equals. But each one of these things, let's just say this is a basic cube that was just made, which, if you make a basic cube, is going to end up being made roughly 2 units by 2 units. Okay, every single face on this cube, since it's a perfect cube, is 2 units by 2 units. 2 by 2. They are all the exact same size. That's what perspective mode does. Perspective mode, which is not orthographic, which is what we're on right now, perspective mode shows you each one of the faces as flat. So let's say, I'll get rid of this for now because it's not that important. Oh, actually, we'll go into object mode and delete this cube for the sake of science. And we'll just make a new one. So perspective mode, which is what I'm looking at right now because I hit 5 again and changed out of orthographic mode. Perspective mode shows each one of the faces as equal sized. You can kind of already tell that these are all the exact same size cube faces. They are all the same size. It kind of makes sense with this mode, with this view. Well, if I were to change one of these sides to smaller like I did before, you can clearly tell in perspective mode that they are changed unless you hit 1. So let's say I have this Now they look like they're the same size as the other ones because, based on the perspective, I am looking at it like a kaleidoscope. Because the way that you'll think about it is your eyes pick up three-dimensional objects. Everything further away from your eyes is brought closer in. The further away something is, the more you're able to take in. If you have, let's say you're standing on top of a building. Let's say this is a building and you're standing on top of it and you're looking down at the world. If you look down at the world from the ground, you see a couple blades of grass. The radius of your view is very small. You have very little sight. Like if I look at the ground right now, I see carpet. I see about 5 feet in radius of carpet because of how close I am to the ground in my current chair. That's how far away I can see. But if I went to the top of a skyscraper, I would be looking down at my house. Not only could I see the entirety of the carpet if I didn't have a roof, that is, but I could see every other room in the house. From where I'm sitting right now, I'm close enough to the ground that it doesn't make a difference. And that's why, right now, these sides look the exact same size. Because perspective mode shows you based off of what you would actually be seeing in reality. This is your perspective. It's actually the perspective of a person. So you are seeing, this is how you would normally see the world. The reason why I'm taking so much time on this is because it definitely takes a lot to understand. But to put it simply, this is your perspective on the world. Because you have two eyes, both of your eyes pick up different images and they put it together. Your brain combines those images to make 3D. So you are able to see, if you were to take your eye and your pupil, let's say this is your pupil here, and like your eye, this is your eye, and the green arrow is where your pupil is. So this is the back of your eye, this is the front of your eye, and the green arrow is what you can see. Okay? You can see here. Because your eyes focus on the same thing, if I were to duplicate this, make two eyes so that you have two eyes, which I guess I can undo, duplicate it, and then move it so that it's perfectly along the x-axis. It's not that important that you guys do that, but here you have two eyes. Let's just say that these were eyes, okay? I know they're not circular, but let's just say they are eyes. This arrow here shows what you're looking at. This arrow here shows what you're looking at in your left eye and your right eye. That shows what your eyes are looking at. Okay? Front of the eye, back of the eye, front of the eye, back of the eye, left eye, right eye. This is where you're looking, and this is where you're looking. You're looking wherever the green arrow is pointing. Okay? So if I were to go cross-eyed, for instance, if I wanted to look at my nose, I would change my eye. If I were to take this and look at it from the top view, I would rotate my eye to look at my nose, because my nose would be in between my two eyes. So if we make a circle here, and we make this our nose, just for symbolism, we have a nose. In order to look at the nose, we have to change our eye's direction so that, well, I'll put this on local so that you can see, so it stays that way. The green arrow, we have to rotate it so that the green arrow looks at the nose. And we have to do that for both eyes, because that's the way our eyes are. Some people have a lazy eye, that's pretty cool, but this is why your eyes go cross-eyed. Well, now, if you look at it that way, this is where three-dimensional stuff gets a lot less complicated, because now it makes sense. Okay? You're looking at your nose. You are going cross-eyed. One eye is pointing a different direction than the other eye. They're both pointing in complete opposite. This one's facing the right. This one's facing the left. Your eyes are pointing in different directions when you're looking at your nose. The same goes for if your nose were to be like away from your body and if it were to fall off, like in those I got your nose jokes from that what parents used to make. It's the same exact thing. Now you're looking at something a little further away. I mean, it's still the nose in this particular analogy, but let's say that object is no longer your nose, and it's actually like a building now. If you're looking at the building, you are still looking with your right eye, you're looking left. With your left eye, you're looking more right. But because of the object being so far away, you are no longer looking so far distantly left with your right eye and so far distantly right with your left eye that it makes a difference. Your eyes look like they are looking in the same direction. That's what perspective is. So if I were to go to my object here, I am now looking at an object, which if I undo all of the previous actions here, and hopefully I think that, yeah, that leaves it with a perfect cube. So now we're back to the perfect cube here, except the fact is it still has the one side, the one edge, or one face here that's different sized than the other ones if you look really closely. Like it's very clearly smaller. But if we look at it from the front view, we see that it is the same size. It could be overshadowing it, but you can see if you look really closely, it is in fact not. Because, are we in edit mode? Okay, there we go. It's very clearly smaller now, but if we match it to the exact size of the other shape there, when we go out of that mode, we find out that this is actually smaller because this side of our mesh is further away than this side when we're looking at it from this view. When we are looking at it from this view, our eyes are seeing this one closer than the other one. So because our eyes are focused on this one, our eyes are pointing closer, or our right eye is pointing more left, and our left eye is pointing more right, because we're looking at something closer to our face. So that means that the perspective, our eye is now not able to pick up the outside here, like as if this side were smaller. So now we see it as smaller because we are seeing with our left eye. It's not so drastically changed that the pupil positioning is off to the side, because when we changed our eye, I know this is really hard to understand, but when we rotated our eye, the pupil here is now not able to see as much in this direction. Before, it covered from this point right here, this line was the edge of our eye. Our pupil in the very center of our eye, which I guess would be about like right here in perspective, because it'd be in the very center of the eye, that there can see everything on both sides of this green line because it's in the center of the green line. So it's picking up imagery from both sides of the green line. But if we were to rotate our eye, it no longer can see both sides of the green line because it's fully on the left side of that green line. And that's why this object here can be seen here, because as of right here in perspective mode, I can see this side, I can see that side, because the viewport is trying to manipulate, when in perspective mode, a three-dimensional view. So what you would experience with your eye, essentially, it's two separate cameras picking up what your eyes would normally pick up if you were looking at this object here. So this is what your eyes would normally see if you had an object exactly like this in your hand and you were looking at it. This is what you would see. But if you go and hit 5, it hits orthographic mode, which basically takes this entire object here, and I know you can kind of see it if you rotate around, but if you stop, you can notice that it's flat. You can't tell if this is pushing in or pushing out if you hadn't watched me rotate it. This could be a point on the back side of the mesh, and this could be like the inside walls, or they're the outside walls, and this point is actually closer to the camera, and it's on the exterior. Either way, your brain can't comprehend it because the program is now doing a perfect rendition of a two-dimensional surface. Essentially, we took this three-dimensional object and we squished it flat like a pancake onto a piece of paper. So now you're looking at the exact same object, but it's now squished onto a two-dimensional surface. So now if I go into top view, I can move it. Because it's on a two-dimensional surface, I can move it based off of grid format, which means I can do it exactly. Let's say I wanted to cut off 2 squares from the very center of this. I can go 1, 2. Select this vertex here, and then select this vertex and this vertex, and delete all of those vertices in between. And so it'll delete 2 lines of vertices, whereas if I do it from here, I kind of have to guess. Because if I'm at perspective anyway, I have to kind of guess, because if I go top view, I can't really see the 2 extra lines there. And I mean, I can kind of see the mesh, but I definitely don't know which one's in the center. I definitely don't know which one is closest away. I don't know whether or not it's 2 or 3 outward. Like if I were to actually have that, I don't know if it's these 2 or these 2 that I was going to select, because I am looking at a 3D object, so I am looking at it not perfectly. I don't know where the very center is. Much like an actual 3D object, if I wanted to find the center of a 3D object, I would have to grab a tape measure or like a ruler and measure it from one end over here to this end over here, and then do the math, cut that in half, and then find the halfway point based off of the ruler yet again. So I'd put the ruler back where it was, and then go to the halfway point, and then mark it with like a pencil or something so that I can visually see when I take away the ruler where I need to cut if I wanted to take those 2 squares out. So I'd have to do things with a ruler, whereas I don't need the ruler when I'm in perspective mode because I'm doing everything on a two-dimensional surface. I hope this makes sense. Anyway, guys, I'm going closer to an hour than I thought, than I wanted. I'm going closer to an hour and a little longer than I wanted to, but I think that thoroughly explains what happens there with perspective mode versus orthographic mode on the 5. And then to just finish it off real quick, you've got 0 on your number pad, which puts you into the camera perspective. So here we have a camera, which is a 3D camera, but it's just like a fake camera. Go into the camera mode, boom, you can see from what the camera sees. So now you can take the camera and put it wherever you want, and I'll teach you this right now because I know I'm going to forget, but if you go over it in the Properties tab, turns out I will teach you something from it. You can go to Lock Camera to View, which means you can rotate and move through your viewport the exact same way that you would before, but now you can take the camera with you. So now whatever you're looking at, the camera is also looking at, because you're still in camera perspective. It locks it to your view. If you were to take that out, it would move you from the camera because it locks the camera to that particular view here. And so you can look at the mesh outside of it, but the camera doesn't get affected. You're still going to be looking at it this when you go into camera view. Or you can take the camera with you when you go to manipulate it from the side like that, so that the camera is now seeing what you're seeing. And the camera obviously is only necessary if you're rendering a final product, so that you can put, like, you don't have to carry the camera with you. It kind of makes this area black. Don't carry the camera with you if all you're trying to do right now is manipulate this mesh. There's no need to carry the camera around. The only reason I would do that is if you have one specific angle that you want to hit, but you don't want to guess based off of like taking the camera and moving it. You don't want to guess where that angle is. You want to be able to just see the angle for yourself. So you're going to lock it there and go, I want to see the object from this angle right here. And you can move it exactly where you want to put the camera so that you can see that. And it works perfectly well. Anyways, we're going to go over some extra stuff there. Oh, and one more piece of the number pad is the delete key or the period key. It might not be delete for you guys, but it's delete for me if I hold FN or shift. But the period is the other one on the number key that is very helpful, which if I have an object selected, it just puts me at the center of that object. So now that object is the center of my attention, which helps a lot when I'm trying to move around. So if I had like a duplicate of this object and it's way over there, I can now, instead of trying to manipulate and like scroll over to it and like find it the hard way. There it is. I think that, yeah, there it is. And then try to like center it into my view. Turns out I didn't get it perfect, blah, blah, blah. Instead, I can just hit the delete key and boom, it's perfectly centered everywhere I want it to. And you can see if I do that with that one too, it just perfectly takes me to whatever object I want to be, centers it so that I can manipulate and move around it, and everything works perfectly well. And I lost my center. There it is. I was like, oh. But yeah, that's the delete key. Anyway, in a future video, I am going to talk about more basics. I'm going to be going over a lot of basics. But yes, these videos are extremely long and they go into a lot of detail. But like I said in the last video, these are going to be videos that you don't necessarily have to have. You don't need the videos, these extra long videos if you don't want. I'll make another series with like 6-minute, 7-minute videos that go over everything that I go over here, but really quick and really not very precise, not detailed at all, a lot less rambling. I'm just going to just power through it really quickly, and you guys might like those ones a lot better. I don't know. You guys can choose for yourself. This one particularly I am only making for those people that want to in-depth learn how to use Blender and know exactly what they're doing. So this goes into a lot more depth about what everything is and a lot deeper explanations so that you're not just left with, oh, look, if you middle click, you can move around. Instead, you get the why does that work, or why does that happen, or what good can it do you, or what uses would you have. That's what this series is for, is to tell you all of the questions that aren't just answered by what you can do. You need, sometimes you want answers for why, or what does it do, what's its purpose. Not just what can I do, but how does it affect my animation? How can I make it, my animation, better by using those tactics? And that's what this series is. So go to the other series if you want quick and easy ways to start using the software, or continue on this series with the longer videos to make it a lot more in-depth details, so you can, by the end of this, probably know a lot more than all the people that skip out and watch the short videos. You can probably know a lot more watching these ones. But anyway, that is that. I'll go over some more basics, like how I do move around the viewport and all of that. How you move around the viewport, how to create certain things, and in our next video, because I know that those things are not going to take as much as I said. This one wasn't going to take 30 minutes. I know for a fact that moving around the viewport, no matter how complex I try to make it, or no matter how much detail I go into, it does not take that long to explain. So in our next video, instead of covering just the basics on how to move around, and only covering those, we are also going to be making a pretty interesting project. I'm going to be showing you guys how to make an egg. So it's going to be pretty interesting. I mean, it is just an egg, so it's nothing special. It's not something huge, but we're going to make it a photorealistic egg, so it's going to look really fantastic, really cool, and I think you guys would be excited just to get to know how to do a basic thing. And obviously in the future I will get into like how to make really high detailed scenes. But for beginner tutorial, just for teaching the basics of how to use Blender, I think an egg is plenty more than enough. I'll just teach you guys how to manipulate stuff, how to use edit mode, what to do when you're using edit mode, object mode, vertex mode, paint mode, what all the different modes do to be able to make the egg the way that we want to. And I think that'll be plenty more than enough to cover. And I'll see you guys in that next video. I hope you enjoyed this one. I honestly do. I hope I didn't ramble around for too long. But you know, guys, just enjoy your day. Play around with this a little bit. Not too much, don't change a bunch of the settings, but play around with the viewport. You can touch anything you want in here, delete it if you want, and just undo it with Control Z. So just remember that you have an undo button and you'll be fine. But yeah, just play around with it, work with the stuff that we've gone over so far, and watch the next video for a beginner tutorial on how to move around the viewport and a little intro to making meshes. So we'll see you in that next video when we're going to make ourselves an egg. Hope you guys get excited and have an excellent day. Yes, that was awful. Stay awesome, guys.